Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Charles Mattocks, and for those who don't know me, I welcome to Urban Longevity. First of all, I am a television producer with shows on major networks that focuses on health-related topics and everything from diabetes to cancer, you name it. And what we do is we actually bring some of the biggest and the best experts in the world to come together to inspire, to educate those who are either living with a condition. And one of the things that I found was that we focus on people who are tried and tested and have so much knowledge in health, but they're using alternative ways to treat people. So our series reverse that we featured, our first series that we did was on diabetes, and the results were amazing. We were able to see people come off medication, reduce medication, change their full health outcomes. And it's kind of led me to doing a few other amazing shows. And we have a new series that we're working on called Reverse Longevity. And we've literally teamed up with some of the best in the world, coming from as far as Singapore to Dubai, to really look at how we can live longer and healthier lives. And we know we all want to live longer and healthier lives. One of the things I did was I named it Reversed Urban Longevity because I wanted to be able to. I see so much in this space, and a lot of times it's talking to experts, scientists talking to scientists. And I wanted to create something that was able to reach a more diverse audience, right? I mean, we all deserve the information, right? Whether you come from a rich family or a poor family, we all deserve and should get the information on how we could live our best and healthier lives. Today, we are featuring one of the pioneers of longevity. This man is just he can go for days on the information. He's living proof, and I think that the audience will definitely get an understanding of longevity, the state of longevity. I wanted to bring him on, Dr. Aubrey D. Gray. How are you?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Charles.
So, when doing this, I kind of want to make it as if someone never knew about longevity as well, and they're hearing it for the first time. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself and how you got started in this field of longevity, because a lot of people who may see this, they don't know anything about longevity. They've never heard of it. They've never heard of anti-aging, any of these things. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the longevity field.
Sure. So, yeah, I was actually a rather late entrant to the field in terms of my own trajectory. I started out in computer science, working on artificial intelligence research back in the 1980s, when that was a very different field from what it is now. And I was working in that area because I felt that it was a bad thing that people have to spend so much of their time doing things that they would not do unless they were being paid for them. And, so I wanted to fix that by improving automation, which meant working in AI. So my undergrad degree was in computer science, and, I was pretty happy doing that kind of thing. And then during that time, I met and married a biologist. And and I, accidentally learned a lot of biology over the dinner table, but also I began to realize that she and the other biologists I was meeting were actually not interested in aging.
Hmm.
And I thought that's completely crazy because I had grown up since my earliest childhood days feeling and understanding that aging is obviously the biggest problem for humanity by far, far bigger than the problem of having to work, right? That I was already working on. So I basically decided I've got to switch fields. I had previously assumed that biologists would be working on this themselves, and so they didn't need me. And it turned out that wasn't true. So I switched fields. I was in a good position to do that, and here I am, really. That's my motivation. So now I got my PhD in biology. I moved forward and had some influential ideas. I've ended up not only overseeing a lot of the cutting edge science that is bringing the problem of aging under medical control, but also being a high profile advocate for this and doing a lot of public speaking. The the whole the word longevity is a bit too much of an abbreviation. You know, it sounds like it's just talking about how long you live,
Mm,
which of course is what it's defined to mean. But really, the word is being used these days to encompass the entire discipline of bringing aging under medical control, helping people to stay healthy for a longer amount of time than they normally would. So some people use the word health span. They say we're extending the health span of people, and that's what we would like to do. At the moment, we can extend health span a little bit by the measures that are available today. We'd like to
mm,
do it by a great deal more than a little bit,
mhm,
and there will be a side effect that you'll live longer.
mhm,
It's a side effect. A lot of the misconceptions and misrepresentations of the work that I and others do revolves around the idea that we are trying to get people to live longer without getting them to stay healthy longer, which is complete nonsense. What we're all about is getting people to stay healthy longer and live longer as a side effect, a side benefit of that.
mm. You compared aging to a car wearing down over time. Can you explain that?
Sure. So the body's a machine. It's a really, 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 really complicated machine, but it's still a machine.
Yeah.
We have the additional handicap that we don't have the plans, the blueprint, the way we do for a car. But still, what do I mean when I say that the body's a machine? What I simply mean is that its function is determined by its structure, by its composition, right? So if we have an old car, it's beaten up, it's not working really, doors are falling off, things like that, then we have the technology to fix it up, to repair the various types of damage that it has, and to make it as good as new. And of course, the right way to do that is not to wait until the doors are falling off, but rather to have some kind of annual preventative maintenance. That's what we do with cars. And it works. It works really quite well. Cars can last as long as the manufacturer expected them to last, just if you take them into the garage every year. Now, the thing is, though, there are some cars, not very many, but some, that last a hell of a lot longer than how the manufacturers expected them to last. There are cars that are more than 100 years old that were designed to last maybe 10 or 15 years at the outside.
Mm,
How come? The answer is because the maintenance that gets done when you do this annual thing that you're legally required to do in a garage every year, that's not the maximum that you can do. You can be a bit more comprehensive than that. And if you are, lo and behold, you end up with a car that simply continues to behave, to function just as well as the day it was built, however long ago it was built. So, this might have been surprising to the people 100 years ago who built these cars. If you'd asked them, are any of your cars going to last 100 years? They'd have laughed at you. But if you take someone today who owns a car that's 100 years old and you say, is it going to last another 100 years? They'll say, well, of course. Why the hell not? Right? So that's the analogy. And some people think it's an overly, um, um, tentative analogy, that it doesn't really fly, but it does.
mm,
The only things that people say that say it's not a good analogy are, number one, that, well, the body's so complicated. Well, that's the difference of degree. It's the reason why we can't already do to the human body the same as we can do to a car.
mhm,
And but that doesn't say that we can't do it in the future, perhaps the foreseeable future. And the second reason is that the body already has inbuilt into itself a huge amount of automatic self-repair machinery. So there are lots of types of damage that the body does to itself in the course of its normal operation that we don't see because that damage gets repaired as it comes into existence. And people say, well, that makes the body not a machine. That's nonsense. What it says is that the problem that we have in maintaining the body with medicine is easier than it would be if we didn't have all that automatic built-in self-repair machinery to fix some of the damage without us having to do it ourselves,
Hmm.
right?
Now you do say, and along that topic, that we don't have to get sick as we get older. Is because of the repairing, or explain some of that, Aubrey?
That's what it's all about. My goal is so that people do not have to get sick when they get old. Being chronologically old today means being biologically old, which means being functionally deficient, whether physically or mentally or both. And that's the thing that my goal is to prevent. I want people to be able to stay just as functional as they were when they were in their 20s or 30s, however long ago they were born.
Hmm. Now, Aubrey, where did you get that fire, that passion? Because I have that same fire. It's like I love to help people. I live to leave a mark in helping other people's lives. Where did that fire for you come from?
Yeah, so for me, I can trace it back to a very early event in my childhood. And the reason I can do this is because it actually was the same fire that started me out in artificial intelligence research. Um, it was simply that I realized that what I wanted to do with my life was to make a difference. Now, how did I realize that? Rather like comical event, actually. What happened was I was about 8 or 9 years old,
Mhm.
and my mother was really trying hard to get me to practice the piano. She
Hmm.
wanted me to play the piano well. She played the piano a little bit. She didn't play it well. She wanted me to play it well, so she wanted me to practice. And I was resistant to this. I really didn't want to do this. But one thing that my mother had given me by this formative age was introspection. She had given me a, a desire to understand why I thought what I thought, along with a desire to understand everything, really. Um, and so I thought about why do I not want to play the piano, to practice the piano? And it didn't take me any time at all to find the answer to that question. The answer was simply that the best case outcome of
Mm,
spending all this time tapping away on this thing would be that I would become a good pianist. And
mm,
that just wasn't good enough for me. I realized that there are lots of other good pianists already.
yeah.
Why the hell would I want to just become another one?
Mm,
And that crystallized fairly rapidly into the understanding that what I really wanted to do with my life was be a scientist of some form,
mm,
because scientists are the people who make the biggest difference in the long run to humanity.
yeah.
And that crystallized around the age of 15 into realizing that I wanted to go into computer science because I found that I was pretty damn good at programming. That's when I
Hmm.
first started doing so. Um, and that went fine until I was maybe 27, 28, something like that, which is when I switched fields.
Mm. Aubrey, as an advocate myself, as someone who is passionate about health, there are so many things I wish I could do. There's so many things I wish I can change and touch and we look at this system and we're like, man, why aren't they getting it? Why don't they see that if we can go down this direction, that we could make an impact on lives? What's the most frustrating thing at times for you? What do you wish you can do if you had all the resources to get it done, to advance the health outcomes, better health outcomes? What would you want to do?
Well, I want to make a distinction between the two ways in which you asked that question. You
Mm,
said, "What do I wish I could do?" And you said, "What frustrates me?" Those are
yeah.
not the same. I have different answers to those two. Um,
Feel
um,
free.
all right. So, what I wish I would be able to do is to command a very large amount of resources, financial resources, to deploy, to mobilize the medical and also the wider community, not only to hasten the development of therapies that really do bring aging under medical control
Mhm.
and help people to stay healthy however long ago they were born, but also to disseminate those technologies, those new medicines, to the whole world, so that absolutely everybody who is old enough to need this, because they are, in striking distance of going downhill as a result of their age, um, is able to access these medicines and therefore not go downhill as a result of their age. That's what I want to have happen. I want a lot more financial resources to be thrown at this thing. It's already a lot better than it was 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago when I started,
Hmm.
but it's certainly nowhere near enough. But
Hmm.
let me go to the second part, the other way you phrased the question. What frustrates me?
Yeah.
Nothing really frustrates me,
Hmm.
and that's partly because of the kind of personality I have. I'm always a glass half full kind of person.
Hmm.
Um, but mainly it's because I understand, at the level of people's psychology, I understand pretty well why it is so difficult to get society to allocate the amount of money to this research that they already allocate to, pet food, let alone,
Yeah.
defense or anything.
Yeah.
And the answer is that people have had to live with the inevitability of aging
Hmm.
since they figured out that aging existed. Millennia have gone by when aging was known to exist and known to be this utterly terrible, slow, inexorable decay that would eventually kill you, but before it kills you, it causes you to suffer a lot,
Hmm.
right? Um, with absolutely nothing that could be done about it.
Hmm.
What do you do in that situation? All you can do is find some way to put it out of your minds, and get on with your miserably short life and hope for the best, and make the best of what you've got. And that's what people have been doing. I call it rational denial, right? And it made perfect sense until I came along, basically, until 20 odd years ago,
Hmm.
um, because we didn't have a plan. We didn't have any idea what to do next.
Hmm.
Moreover, if we look at the question then, how do you put it out of your minds? This is what I call the pro-aging trance. You, you have only two options really. One option is that you trick yourself into believing that aging is in some sense woven into the fabric of the universe, such that doing anything about it with any technology would be akin to developing perpetual motion. It's just like, not possible. And serious people with letters after their names will actually adhere to such a point of view. I mean, it is so embarrassing. It's not true. But the fact is, people do this, and I believe they do it because they feel that there's no other way to put aging out of their minds. The predominant approach, however, is not that. The predominant approach is not to say that it's a pipe dream, but rather to say that aging is a blessing in disguise. That somehow, for whatever reason, if we were to bring aging under medical control, we would regret it because we would be creating some kind of worse problem. And
Hmm.
people will say things like, "Oh dear, well, we put all the people, and won't dictators live forever?" And won't it only be for the rich and exacerbate
Yeah.
inequality? And doesn't death give meaning to life? Things
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah.
I've been receiving that kind of feedback ever since I started getting up on stage and on camera, and as you can imagine, I'm a little bit sick of it. But but the fact is, I do not get frustrated by it. To come back to
Hmm.
that, what I was
Yeah.
saying, because I recognize that it is inherent in human psychology that they're going to be irrational in these ways, right up until we get close enough to bringing aging under medical control that people feel they can afford not they can afford to get their hopes up.
Hmm.
They can take the risk of becoming emotionally invested in all of this.
So Aubrey, what strides and breakthroughs have we seen, in the science of this that we can say will soon be or can be implemented in day to day life?
So, if I were to answer that question directly, I would be here for at least half an hour because there are a huge number of such strides that are happening all the time. Every month, there's some new breakthrough. And certainly it's accelerating. Of course,
Mm.
from my point of view, sitting at the coalface of all of this as a scientist, leading this charge, I see the breakthroughs that would take half an hour just to explain why they are a breakthrough.
Yeah.
Right? But we can talk about some of the more high-profile ones easily
Hmm.
enough, ones
Hmm.
that your audience will already have heard of,
Hmm.
not least because they are relevant not only to aging research, but to biomedical research in general. So I guess most people who are listening to this will have heard of iPS cells, induced pluripotent stem cells, the new technology that was developed it's only about 15 or 17 years ago now, already received the Nobel Prize for taking normal cells out of any person and essentially turning their developmental clock backwards. So this is not rejuvenation in the aging sense, it's rejuvenation in a different sense, but turning them into cells that have much more potency, much more ability to do medically relevant, medically beneficial things. This was discovered, as I say, not very long ago, and it's being used very ubiquitously already, and there's plenty more progress being made right now. Another one is CRISPR, the ability to edit our genome. This is something that is, again, was developed not very long ago, only a decade or so ago. It still isn't ready for prime time to use in humans, but it's getting very close to that. These are things that will make enormous differences to the medicine against the health problems of late life, just as they will against the health problems of early life. So those are just a couple of examples. There are plenty of examples that are specific to aspects of aging, but as I say, I could go on forever if you were to read it. Now, here's the thing. It's one thing
Yeah.
I do want to end this answer with, though. The cumulative effect of these advances, both the easy to explain ones and the complicated ones, is enormously impactful on scientists as the audience.
Hmm.
Scientists, I'm not the only person out here on stage and on camera, saying what I think about this whole space. Most of the people who are, other than myself, they have to worry a little bit about their reputations. They have to worry about, whether the next grant application is going to be funded, whether the next investor is
Hmm.
going to write their check and so on. So
True.
they've got to be a little more careful than I have to be about what they say.
Hmm.
And they are being less careful,
Hmm.
or should I say, more optimistic, more bullish, day by day.
Hmm.
A particularly important milestone was reached just a couple of months ago in this regard, when a very large number, I would say a large majority of my colleagues, my illustrious, credentialed colleagues in the biology of aging, signed up to what we have called the Dublin Longevity Declaration. I don't know if you've heard about this, but everybody should have done,
Hmm.
because it is a statement, a very clear statement, that we are within striking distance of bringing aging under medical control. A far more gung ho, robust statement of that nature than the community as a consensus has ever made before. And we put it online, and we encourage people to sign, and we've already got a couple of thousand signatures. So I encourage everybody to go and sign up for that. You don't have to be an expert to be entitled to sign. But the point is, the experts are the people who really, give this thing its importance.
Yeah. So Aubrey, what can people do today if they're listening to this podcast and they want to know, I love this information, but what can I do today to live a longer and healthier life? Are there tools that they can implement in their lives now?
All right. So the answers that you are not looking for are: number one, sign the Dublin Longevity Declaration, dublinlongevitydeclaration.org. It's easy to find online. Um, Number two, be an advocate. Do what you yourself, Charles, are doing right now. What you're doing right now is you're putting me on stage to talk. You're exposing me to your audience, and that is enormously important.
Yeah.
Advocacy is everything. Education is everything, because it's what grinds down the misconceptions that I mentioned earlier. So everybody, whether they are in your position of having a big audience or whether they just have their family and their friends and their colleagues, everybody can do advocacy. So I
Mhm.
really want to emphasize that. But of course, that's not the answer you were looking for. The answer you were looking for is, what can I do today for my own health, just with lifestyle and supplements and diet and so on. And I've got to be honest, fact is, not much. And it's worse than not much, actually, because what you can do that might give you a little bit will be different for different people. There's no single generalization I can give because different people's metabolism differ too much for that. That's, I mean, it, it's if it were that easy, if there were some lowest common denominator that was good for everybody, then you wouldn't have this, continuous stream of books coming out with new diets and new lifestyle things, because something would have just worked. It's just not like that, I'm afraid. The certain truth is that you should be living the way your mother told you to. You shouldn't be getting seriously overweight. You shouldn't smoke. You should have a reasonably varied diet. But beyond that, we really can't say a lot.
Hmm.
There are a few things that people are that are fashionable right now, most of which come under the category of calorie restriction mimetics. So what
Hmm.
that means is things that cause your body to be um, deceived into believing that you're not eating enough when in fact you're eating as much as you want.
Hmm.
Um, the reason these things have been interesting is because they work quite well in short-lived laboratory organisms like mice. In the same way that actually not eating as much as you'd like works quite well in laboratory organisms. Of course, actually eating less than you want to is a tricky thing to popularize among the human population. So the drugs that trick the body without making you suffer are quite fashionable and quite attractive. Unfortunately, it turns out that they don't work anywhere near as well in long-lived species like you and me as what they do in short-lived species that we use in the lab. So it's not really much of a start. Plus, also, it only really works significantly if you start really early in life. And what we really care about is people who are already in middle age or older and are you know in danger of starting to go downhill quite soon.
So a child being born today,
Uh-huh.
what can they expect as far as longevity?
Well, so expect is the operative word here because, of course, we have no idea what's actually going to happen. The future is hard to predict, right? So I can only give probabilistic answers to that question. But I'm fine with doing that. So I will. What can someone born today expect to see? What is their likely trajectory? Well, in terms of everything that I don't work on, climate change, asteroids, um, AI, these things I'm not going to opine. It's a very unpredictable few decades coming up. No question about that. But in the event that we get through those few decades until let's say 2050, for the sake of argument, um, and things are more or less okay. The world has not boiled, the world has not been hit by an asteroid, and civilization has not been destroyed by unfriendly artificial intelligence, and so
Yeah.
on. Supposing all of those things come right, then the question you're really asking is, what can that person born today look forward to in terms of their health?
Exactly.
And I believe that the likelihood is well over 50%, I would say 70%, that by 2050, we will have reached this threshold that I have termed longevity escape velocity, which is basically the point where we haven't completely 100% comprehensively figured out how to repair all of the damage that the body does to itself in the course of its normal operation. But we have figured out how to repair a sufficient proportion of that damage to be able to push out the decline in health that is seen today in old age by at least 20 years.
Mm.
Now, 20 years is a very long time in any technology, including medical technology, which means that if we can do it for 20 years, then during those 20 years, we're going to be able to figure out with very high probability how to do it for the next 20 years and so on.
Hmm.
So that basically means that once we get those first 20 years, we've got an indefinite amount of time. So to condense that all down to an answer to the question you originally asked, people born today have I would say, a 70% chance or more of never suffering from health problems as a consequence of how long ago they were born, however long ago that ends up being.
Wow, that is powerful. Aubrey, who in this space Is there anyone that you admire that is doing some groundbreaking things?
Where do I begin? I mean, of course, there are high-profile people I admire.
Yeah.
Um, Peter Diamandis is a great example. He's a consummate synthesis of techno-visionary and salesman, head and shoulders the best in the world. And
Mm,
I'm privileged that he and I are good friends. Of course, I have many scientists, people that I work with and who are colleagues of mine, and similarly outspoken in the public stage. People like George Church, David Sinclair, people like that. But actually, the real answer to your question is the foot soldiers.
mhm,
You know, I've had people for the past 20 years working for me who are every bit as dedicated as I am to this mission.
mm,
They work every
mm.
bit as hard, you
Yeah.
know, and people don't come up to them in the street and ask for their autographs, but they
Yeah.
work just as hard anyway, right?
Hmm.
So I really look up to those people.
I love that. I love that. So, um, in parting, well, let me also ask about being able to reach the underserved or the minority population. Is that going to be accessible for them as well?
100%. So, I grew up in the UK, which had a public healthcare system. I now live in California in the US, which has obviously a healthcare system that's overwhelmingly driven by insurance. Very different systems. But that contrast is not actually important in the answer to your question. Because what's really important is not how the money gets from this person to that person, from the world in general to the person who's sick. What matters is whether it gets to them.
Hmm.
And in the US, there is more inequality than there is in Western Europe in general,
Hmm.
but it's still, there's still some kind of safety net. It's not good enough, no question. It's not good enough in Western Europe, but it exists. Now we must ask ourselves why. The answer is there's a certain amount of compassion in society, but there's a bigger answer that's relevant to this particular question when it comes to the problems of late life. At the moment, in every country, including the US certainly, the overwhelming majority of medical expenditure goes on the elderly, goes on problems that simply do not afflict hardly any young adults. Even in the developing world, that is now true. Because in the developing world, obviously, there has historically been a lot of death from infectious diseases and so on that happens early in life where you don't get to have Alzheimer's or whatever. But now we've reached a point where there's not a single country in the world, not even in sub Saharan Africa, that has an average longevity lower than 50, right? So every country in the world, aging is their main number one medical problem.
Hmm.
Right. So what that means is money. It means that you don't even need to consider the humanitarian imperative, the moral imperative. If you
Hmm.
just look at the sheer mercenary economic imperative of supplying these future medicines, what they will do is, yes, even though the future medicines will themselves cost money, they
Hmm.
will save vastly more money by preventing the expenditure that we have today on keeping sick people alive, because people won't be getting sick in the first place.
Hmm.
Right. Now, that means that there is no question whatsoever. As soon as these medicines become available to anybody at any cost, they will be made available by governments at the taxpayer's expense to absolutely everybody, because that expense will be temporary. There will be increased prosperity as a result. My job right now, in terms of advocacy to public policy makers and so on, which I do a lot of, and I have a lot of other people who do it, is precisely to get that across to them, to get them to what I like to say, anticipate the anticipation, to get money spent now to get infrastructure in place, to train medical personnel and so on, so as to ensure that as soon as these therapies do come along, they are in a position to be delivered to everybody who's old enough to need them.
I love it. I love it. So, in parting, what would you say to the audience that is watching you right now? That is interested and wants to learn more, um, and looking for, how soon can we see any of these technologies or these medicines? How long do we have to wait?
Well, so to answer the last part of that question, as I mentioned earlier, this is pioneering technology. Nobody can predict timeframes accurately, but I think we have a good chance of getting there in the foreseeable future. In particular, I normally point to the time frame within which I think we have a 50-50 chance of reaching that threshold that I call longevity escape velocity. And these days, my threshold is 12 to 15 years from now. So that means 2035 to 2040,
Mhm.
basically, that kind of time frame. That's not very long away.
Right.
Um, Now, to answer the rest of the question, what do I want what do I want people to take home? What do I want people to do to learn more, and so on? Well, we have a website, levfoundation.avf.org. You can put that in the show notes, I'm sure. I am very much a man of the people. My email address is public, Aubrey at levf.org. So anyone can write to me. And there's resources online actually quite extensively now. The community has been pretty good at getting things out there. There are newsletters, there are mailing lists, there are websites and so on, ways to help you be a better advocate. If you want to be an advocate, there are plenty of ways to tell you how to be good at that. If you want to get in, if you're in high school or if you're an undergraduate and you're choosing your next step in your academic career, write to us and we'll give you advice on what to do and where to go, and so on. And the same applies to everybody who has an audience. Everybody like you, for example, who has a big audience online, whether it's in print. Interview me. This is everything helps. There's no single answer. It takes a village to get this done. But every day that we bring this forward saves 110,000 lives. That's the number of people who die of aging every day worldwide. That's 35 World Trade Centers. It's
Mm.
not trivial.
Aubrey, are you proud of the work that you've done? I mean, does it give you a sense of pride?
I certainly am proud of what I've achieved over the years,
Yeah.
but I never rest on my laurels because
Mm.
there's so much more still to do. I am, the main reaction that I have when I think about where we are now relative to where we were 20 years ago when I began, and indeed the contribution that I've made to that progress is it's simply a motivator. It tells me that I have the potential to make more progress going forward,
Yeah.
and it energizes me.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And off the topic, how would you love to be remembered? How would you like to be remembered?
Oh, fuck that. Legacies are for dead people.
I love that. I love that. I love that, Aubrey. Well, I'm excited to see you in Costa Rica and to get this information out there. I think it's going to be a powerful, powerful series with some of the best in the business. And I, lo- I love your personality. I
Thank you.
love your vibe.
Likewise.
And let's change the world, Aubrey. Let's
Absolutely
change the
right.
world. All right, brother.
Thanks very
Thank
much,
you so
Charles.
much. Thank you so much for being a part of Urban Longevity. And we have some great guests coming up. I'm excited about that, and a new series that we're going to shoot in January that will be out a couple months after that. Thank you, Aubrey.
Pleasure.
Talk soon. So, man, it gets no better than Aubrey de Grey. He is wonderful. I can't wait to be on set with him. But I think what I'm trying to do is be a little bit more, get the word out there. I want to deliver it in such a way, and we do have a good audience. We work with some great people and some great experts and some doctors around the world, and getting this audience, this information out to a different audience, and those who are actually educated in this field too as well. I watch a lot of videos on longevity and see some great people, and I think pushing this message and keeping it alive and keeping it moving is very key. So look out for some new episodes coming on soon. Do follow, like, subscribe, share, and comment, right? And we'll see you on the next episode of Urban Longevity. Thank you so much.